I thought the whole movie actually revolves around the notion of realism. So, you know, given the fact that the film itself is a documentary, that Benjamin Ree, the director of the film, was following you for 4 years, and of course, Karl Bertil. And that's one aspect of it. And then it got me thinking about also the liaisons between art and life, and also how they relate to the certain style of your art. So can you share your thoughts about realism for the beginning, please?
So hello, and thank you very much for having me. I'm really, really glad. You know, these kind of isms, shall that be art or whatever labels or shelves that we tend to put into things and aspects in our lives, I'm not so comfortable with it, but I do understand your overall question, and it's indeed quite interesting. So yes, as you might have understood from, let's start with my paintings, because what else would self-occupied painters start with than that? So yes, I do believe in that there is undoubtful beauty in life as life is, life, how it's created. And I really don't think that me or anyone could invent anything better from a fantasy. I just got approved that what life can offer us is so much strong, and so much more strong than what we could have ever invented. And I think the movie might prove this as well. Like somehow life can be bigger than life. So to my paintings is, of course, my observation of reality, whatever we can feel as reality is, and to try to imprint it onto my paintings. So, for example, when I started to paint Karl Bertil, you know, I first had an idea of, I want to make a kind of scene of the crime, you know, where they were taken off the canvases from the frames, and I wanted to kind of emphasize the crime. But the moment I saw him at the courtroom, all these concepts or plans totally vanished, and I just simply purely wanted to make a portrait of Karl Bertil as a human being, and to see how much he allows me to see of him, meaning to, you know, remove all labels of him, the prejudices, what he's told, and to see the human in him. And so I hope I managed.
This is actually exactly the point where I meant in realism, not in the art movement, but actually about, even I think the film has this really exquisite way of showing your perspective and Bertil's perspective. So showing realism maybe to the fullest, doing like 360 degrees, and not leaving it, you know, to stereotypes or whatever are in. So this kind of really harsh realism. And actually, you mentioned the court, and I'm interested in that because I read that the court drawings, you actually made them, and Benjamin Ree started to film just on your fourth meeting. So he had to compensate in the movie. And actually a friend of yours who did something completely else, yes, but she filmed it. And actually it's mended without, it's like seamless. It's nobody can see that it's there. But to think that actually your imprint, your hand, you know, drawing is actually part of the flow.
Well, first of all, I would not allow Benjamin to hire any other artists to do the court drawings. But as you said yourself, when Benjamin stepped into the very, very fresh friendship of Bertil and me. That was after our 4th meeting together with Bertil. And so the footage we have of me creating the Swan Song painting or other paintings was thanks to my very dear friend here in Norway. Her name is Merete Morken Andersen, wonderful writer. And she was at that time working on her project, and it included also every possible research in the process of creativity. And I was actually using her atelier at that time. So I was her daily subject of research. And of course, we could have not thought about how this material can also be used or will be used beside of her own project. And that's very mind-blowing indeed, yeah. Reality.
So I wanted to ask you, actually your art style, I thought it's more correspondent with hyperrealism than with realism, but and I know that, you know, hyperrealism came back to the forefront in the 1990s because it brought something with it that people started to pinpoint, although it's an idea that is already from the beginning of the 20th century, even the end of the 19th century, about uncanniness. And I wanted to ask you if the uncanny, I know that Bertil during the film, he says that you have like an affinity to dark things, dark matters. But I wanted to ask you if the uncanny is a central theme for you or something in your life, or it came when you let Bertil come into your studio.
I really have to give you respect for your questions. It's so, I just hope that the audience can follow, because these are very quite deep and very almost like a nerdy questions. And thank you so much for it. I'll try to answer as human as I can. You know, first of all, okay, so let's start with what you started to speak of, which is sort of that the realism or hyperrealism had some kind of return in the 90s, you know, but these are things about art, some way can weird entire thing is a conceptual installation, and I don't know what. Sure, these things probably happen for a reason, but since very early childhood, I have always caught myself mostly hooked on going through pictures of old masters from.
Wait, we couldn't hear you. We couldn't hear
something in these paintings that.
Can you say that again, because we couldn't hear you well, the last sentence.
So yeah, I always from early childhood, I caught myself being much more hooked on pictures of old masters of the Renaissance era or early Baroque or Gothic, where you do feel that these artists, these painters, some in here is for again.
Yes, now I think we can see you again, because I see that your picture is better.
Okay, I'm sorry. It's just unfortunately bad connection in the forest where I am. So I basically have found out that art is not a decoration. Art really is something that should communicate with you if you as a viewer are willing to receive this sort of message, to communicate with you something very essential. And there are not so many essential things in life. You know, it's life, death, love, hate, and God. Shall that be with big G or small g? Yeah. Let's say the acceptance of something divine, or acceptance of something that we are not the kings of the world, we the human beings. You carries theories, a lot of darkness. Shall that be? Excuse me?
No, you said that there is a lot of darkness in your work, right?
Yes, of course.
A lot of contrast. But I also wanted to touch upon, because you mentioned, I didn't plan to ask it, but still when I looked through your site, and I was really captured about a triptych that you did of hands. I see that you're very much attracted to hands. And there is a piece that I feel that is fascinating of the hands of Jesus in one gesture, and then another gesture, one hand of Muhammad, and two hands of Moses. So I really urge the public, our public, to go and I think it's amazing. But could you say something about hands in your work and also about this piece specifically, please?
Absolutely. Wow, I'm really flattered. Thank you. So hands for me are very crucial subject to paint. It started in early now going to very drawing, and the professor was forcing us to draw many hands, like our own hands, in like just fast drawings. And hands are so difficult thing to draw or paint.
Yeah.
And I've enjoyed the pain. I enjoyed how difficult it was, and it just grew bigger. And then when I managed to get a little bit better with the oil painting, I just needed to conquer this as well. And yes, hands talk a lot of stories. They tell so many stories, and often I can read much more about you from your.
Wait, now you got a little bit disconnected.
And now we froze. Now.
Yeah, can you say again what you said about that? From the hands you can get more information about the character?
Then from the face, very often. Yes, yes.
So because it looked like.
But this. Mm-hmm.
Sorry,
I want to then speak about the triptych that you spoke about. That's of course a different. That's a different motivation for me to make this. So it's called Signs of God. Mm-hmm. And signs because these are signs of the sign language for the deaf and mute people. And these are therefore the signs of these three prophets are in the language, the sign language of not the country, but the culture where this specific religion is placed. So we have sort of the European/American sign for Jesus. Then we have Arabic sign for Muhammad. And then of course we have a sign from your gorgeous country about Moses.
Wow.
And I wanted to show that both of these three guys have so much in common, I sort of feel they might belong together because they talk about the same in my perspective.
So I will tell you what I felt when I saw this triptych. I looked at it and I thought that the gestures come from sculptures. This is what I felt. And then I thought it's like mudras in Buddhism, that the gestures are actually saying something.
But they are.
Of course. This is what you said. There's a message so it really moved me when you said it's from the sign language. It's beautiful. So
thank you.
I will go to another hand, the hand of Bertel, because in the film, it's a sort of, let's say it's one of the peaks, at least for me. I don't know, probably other people will see it maybe differently. But your boyfriend, I hope I'm pronouncing his name well, Oysten. Yes, thank you. So he touched upon like a moral issue. He said, the hand for Bertel after the car crash was something super traumatic, something of a crisis, something that is showing fragility. And he was like trying to search in you, and he said, but you are treating this hand, and you said as an aesthetic, but before you said it, he said like something that is plastic, something that is detached, let's say, from the event or the context. And you said it's like the stigma of Jesus or of San Francisco's from Assisi that he got it. And it became like a whole and complete other thing. Can you talk about this transformation to symbolism from that very concrete, you know, wounded hand?
Mm-hmm. You know, very often in my paintings, and I will of course speak concretely about this one in a second, but I don't often use my intellect or my intellectual knowledge. I really have quite a lot of things coming from the intuition, you know. But of course, when I visited Bertil after his terrible car accident, the first I saw was wound hand, and now we froze again.
No, we heard that the first thing that you saw was the hand. Yes.
Okay. And there probably steps in like the sort of empathic me goes on the side, because I just automatically, as a program, go into the mode of, okay, I have to paint that.
Yeah.
So this is also what Øystein was, of course, you hear promoting, and the only thing I care for is my drawing or painting, which is true, but it, of course, I allow myself to do this at the moment when I see that Karl Bertil is on a very, very good way to recovery, you know. So I feel I sorted it out with myself. I don't feel thing.
Oh, the connection was a bit bad. But let's talk about the movie's end. It poses the intertwining relationship between you and Bertil in a very beautiful, I think, way, that and even like to have something concrete when you see the painting that you did. So it's like a tree with a sponger, like a parasite plant that around it, that you nurture one another. And one can hardly differentiate, you know, who depends on who actually in this relationship. So can you describe if and how your life and maybe your art changed after meeting Bertil? And maybe, I know he's the absentee, but he's still physically there. Maybe also Benjamin Ree had something to do with it.
So my effect on art, or my inspiration, has grew a lot since Karl Bertil stepped into my life. He actually did become my muse.
Yeah.
Because as we spoke earlier about this presence of darkness and the certain cruciality of it, something that we as people normally tend to avoid, but I think that's my job, to kind of keep you reminded that no, you can't do it. It's what has to my life quite a lot. Let's say he back then was very, very deep source of this possible darkness.
Yeah.
It has developed, of course, as every good thing has to develop. He is totally my muse still today, but I'm really glad that some parts of his darkness he managed to sort out for himself, speaking in the way that, as to that day, he has been sober for 2 years.
Wow.
Which is the achievement that I have endless respect and admiration for, what he managed. He's studying, he has a wonderful woman that he dates. So seeing him having his life back on is powerful. So very sort of inspiring for me. But still, I mean, it does not exclude the darkness. You know, the darkness just becomes a little bit more essential. It's just not of the obvious struggles what we can see in the movie, but it's more of the struggle of yet another human being who is very inspiring for me.
So I would like to terminate at least my questions before we give a chance to the audience. I would like to ask something about tattoos. Because in the film, Bertil is talking about his tattoos. And when he talks about his tattoos, you know, the first impression that you get from Bertil is like a tough guy, you know. It's like you said, I thought it was also one of my picks that you said that he could have been either a terrorist or a prime minister. And the moment you said it in the movie, is like people look at it and say, prime minister, why? And of course, after you hear his background, you can understand he's super intelligent, but you can't see it before. And this is your strong intuition. But in his tattoos, and he starts to explain them, you see the tenderness and the softness and the fragility that he talks about himself. And then at the end of the movie, that's the first time that people see that actually you have a tattoo. And your tattoo looks small, but you know, I'm not sure it's abstract. I won't say what I thought it is, but it's a sort of a focal point at the end. So can you talk, how did you get to that tattoo and what does it symbolize for you?
So you were freezing in few moments, but I think I did understand or get the complexity of your question here.
Okay.
So let's start with Bertil's tattoos.
Yeah.
He is totally covered now from head to toes. He has some new facial tattoos. Wow. And it's, yes, as you say, it's like, of course, it's, for me, it's a beautiful thing. I love tattoos and I love to paint tattoos. Yeah. But of course, you also cannot avoid to see that it's some form of like a protective clothes, like as if you're a knight, you know, going for a fight. So you have this protective layer on you while inside is this quite wounded and at that time quite scared and lost being.
Yeah.
So I understand he needs to have all these shields around himself. For me, this is, I don't think that I need to really protect myself that much with that little piece of ink on my back. Yeah. By the way, it's real. I'll try to show you that it's really there.
Wonderful.
It's so far my only tattoo, but I'm going to expand in a while, in a few weeks, I hope. You know, it's, of course, so it's quite complex, as I believe, what I have on my back. First of all, circle is the most perfect shape in the world, in my opinion. There are 3 circles, one in the other. 3 is symbolically a very powerful number. And it's placed where it is because it's based on also Kabbalah and on the ancient myth as well, where there are points in our bodies, which some of them are gates to another level of our, from the physicality to the consciousness, from the consciousness to the higher. And I do believe and feel that in this part, there is a quite important gate. And also it is, for me, it is sort of emphasizing on one point in our body where, you know, the left and right hemispheres are crossing. Mm-hmm. And we know that one is presented as a more like a masculine type and the other as a feminine. And I think it's important for me to know that this spot is well protected and that these paths will always keep the good direction, that they will not get lost or mingled that much. So just that the energies flow in a good way.
Wow, it's amazing.
Oh,
I know. I have to say that, you know, that traditionally in Japan, the most interesting parts actually that they used to expose in traditional Japan is like what I have. Now I will show my back, that you have an open, and this part, exactly where you have your tattoo, is the most sensual part.
Mm. I see, it's the intuition and it's all one. I mean, you can find it
and all to that point. So I think it's very beautiful that you chose exactly this point, and to choose a circle, it's really beautiful. It's amazing.
Thank you for the new information about the Japanese culture. I should check that out.
You're welcome. So there is a question from the audience, and they say, well, they actually wanted me to go back to maybe to the point of, well, maybe we'll do a closure with the beginning, and to think about just the realism that reality, life, that comes with a narrative and comes with a higher thing. I mean, in your work, although you can see every detail and it's like, you know, mind-blowing how you can do it technically and also in the work, but actually you feel like an uplift. Well, actually like two forces are pulling you up and down because of the darkness and this. So if you could like relate for that, and that will be our last thing for today.
I really have to give respect to both you and the audience, because these questions are so brilliant. It's really, I feel like I'm in some kind of art seminar or philosophy, which I'm not sure that I even have something to say to.
Yeah, no, you said it beautifully.
But this sort of like, yeah, you know, there was really beautiful moment time. I like, there are layers. So there is Bertil, and I am watching Bertil.
Wait, we couldn't hear you. Could you say it again? Sorry.
Okay. So very beautiful situation in the movie, or situations where we have Bertil, that I'm watching him for the painting, and I'm being watched by Benjamin, how I Bertil, you know. So now froze again.
Yeah. No.
Are we okay? Are we
now
here?
You're okay. Yes, now you're okay. So you
once more, I'm sorry for the technicalities. So it was like one person watching, the other person watching the other person. And I really believe that Bertil was watching all of us from somewhere above very often. So that was quite interesting.
Wow.
And then, you know, like, yes, of course, the force is with creativity. Shall that be to create a visual art or a music or write a book, a literature? In general, I think the tendencies of the spiral going drag dark, that's definitely spiral up, where you have the kind of compensation with the divine. That's why I believe that especially people that are creative, they really should better admit the presence of the divine as well. And that's what I feel in the old masters, you know, where they were aware of both. And so it's the constant fight.
Yeah.
And the humanity might be the result. I don't know.
Well, Barbara, thank you very, very much. It was really an eye-opening conversation. For me, I'm sure for the public as well. And I hope to see. I will now follow you from your site, and I guess a lot of people in Israel will follow you.
I'm trying to update it as much as possible, but yeah.
It's really, really, really beautiful. Thank you very, very much. I will just say that I didn't introduce myself. I will say I'm נירית Nilsson, and we thank Brabora קישילקובה.
Very good.
For being with us today in Dok Aviv.
It was my pleasure. Shalom.